The sky over Montana was still pitch black as the digital clock blinked 3:47 a.m. in the freezing small room of the ranger station. Wind howled through the cracks in the doors, sneaking into every corner of the room, jolting Kelsey Mitchell, a 28-year-old ranger with 3 years of hardened experience, out of her restless sleep. The emergency radio suddenly emitted its familiar static hiss. But this time, it wasn't about wandering bears or a hiker slipping down a trail. A tense voice came through Alpha Station. "This is Inspector Ray Castellanos, Kalispell Police Department. We have a level red emergency involving K-9 unit. K-9 Officer Rex went missing during a suspect pursuit in Zone 7 of the park approximately 18 hours ago. Last known coordinates are being transmitted. Immediate assistance required." Kelsey shot upright. Her heart pounded not because of the brutal weather, the outside temperature was 20°, but because of a nameless dread tightening inside her. Rex, she remembered, was a 5-year-old German Shepherd, one of the most thoroughly trained key in the state, specialized in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension. There was no way a dog like that would simply go missing. Something had happened. Something wrong. She flipped on the light, grabbed her thick ranger uniform from the hook, and quickly checked her medical kit, radio emergency food pack, and GPS device. She knew Zone 7 well. 40 square miles of treacherous terrain, gorges ice, and natural traps that could swallow a person without a trace. As she slammed shut the back of her truck, her breath rose in white plumes. In the rearview mirror, the moonlight pierced through the pine trees like a silent warning. And inside her, a chilling instinct. She wasn't just about to rescue a dog. She was about to find something or someone no one expected. She had no idea she was stepping into a rescue mission that would forever change her life and the history of the K-9 force. Along the icy road leading up to Zone 7, Ranger Kelsey's pickup truck rolled silently through pitch-black curves. Her headlights swept across massive snow-covered trees, reflecting off ice crystals like an otherworldly omen. Inside her chest, the name of the dog echoed again and again. Rex. Kelsey had heard of Rex from many fellow officers. The 5-year-old German Shepherd wasn't just a working asset. To Officer Maria Santos, Rex's handler, he was a teammate, a companion, even a silent guardian. Once Rex had saved an entire unit from a booby-trapped meth lab in Helena. Another time, he intercepted an armed smuggler with just a bark and a well-timed block. Rex isn't just a K-9. He's a soul who can sense, protect, and willingly sacrifice, Maria once said. Rex's disappearance in a blizzard and sub-zero temperatures sent chills down Kelsey's spine. A dog like him with elite survival instincts, orientation skills, and lightning reflexes didn't vanish easily. Something unforeseen must have happened. The radio crackled again. Inspector Castellanos' voice this time was softer, worn. "With experience, Mitchell. We've got an update from Maria. Rex vanished while chasing a suspect. Maria had slipped and couldn't continue. The last known location is a cluster of deep ravines, extremely dangerous terrain. And the suspect we arrested this morning confirmed. He never saw the dog again after fleeing." Kelsey said nothing. So Rex hadn't abandoned his mission. He'd continued pursuit, even without command. And now, nearly 20 hours had passed. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "Hold on, Rex. If you're alive, I'll find you. If not, I'll find what could make a warrior like you fall." When Kelsey stopped her truck at the shadowy edge of the forest, where the GP'd last pinged Rex's signal, the air turned suddenly heavy. Snow fell thicker, the silence unnerving. In her hand was a printed photo from the canine file. Rex's piercing eyes, sharp as ice, yet filled with a loyalty and humanity that was almost terrifying. And she knew. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a journey into the edge of loyalty survival, and possibly a secret Rex had guarded with his life. From where the truck stopped, Kelsey stepped into Glacier Forest, a place where sunlight hadn't touched the ground in a long time. She double-checked her gear headlamp compass, GPS emergency bivvy first aid kits for both human and animal, but above all, the steely resolve forged through countless life and death patrols. Zone 7 wasn't like the rest of the park. It was a natural labyrinth of rock crevices, snowdrifts, and fallen trees, a place that had claimed the lives of even the most seasoned adventurers. Beneath the snow-hidden fissures waited silently, and every step could be the last if one wasn't careful. Wind screamed through brittle pine branches like ghostly whispers, but Kelsey didn't flinch. To her, the forest was home, the place she belonged. But today, that forest had become an adversary. She began calling for him, over and over. Rex, Rex, it's me, Kelsey. Her voice echoed off steep rock walls. Silence, then more silence. But Kelsey pressed on. Discipline meant survival, and she refused to surrender hope. After more than an hour of scrambling up icy slopes and crossing paths buried beneath deep snow, she sensed something different. The air colder, the wind sharper, and a smell, unfamiliar. A mix of sweat, old smoke, and something else. The scent of fear buried in frost. Suddenly, her GPS device buzzed. A weak signal, faint but real. Based on the coordinates from the operations center, she pinpointed the last known location, a fan-shaped formation of deep ravines. If Rex left any trace, it'll be there. Moving deeper in, Kelsey suddenly stopped. In the snow, a faint imprint, dog tracks, large, deep, and recent. No mistaking it. Rex. But what made her heart drop was something else beside them, smaller tracks running parallel. Tinier, more delicate, like those of a child. She knelt, hand hovering over the print. Still warm. No way. Who would be out here with Rex? When Kelsey looked up, she found herself standing before a vast, yawning ravine. A single misstep here could bury both person and hope. And then from deep within, a sound. Soft, like a whimper. So faint, it barely broke the air. But she heard it. A child's cry. Her whole body froze, not from the cold, but because she understood Rex wasn't missing. He was protecting someone. A child, in a place no one was ever meant to wander. And this rescue mission was no longer just about saving a dog, but about the survival of a fragile soul in the frozen wild. Kelsey slipped as she approached the edge of the ravine, a dark, icy abyss flanked by snow-covered cliffs and gnarled tree roots jutting down like claws. She shone her flashlight downward. The beam swept over jagged patches of snow, reflecting off glinting ice crystals. And then she saw it. A large black shape lying on its side, motionless. Her heart dropped. No, it was Rex. His tactical vest was crusted with dried blood and frost. The once sleek fur of the K9 shepherd was now matted, filthy, and half buried in the snow. But there was something strange. Kelsey slid down carefully, each footstep sounding like a soft crackle of ice and gravel beneath her boots. She drew closer, and the true weight of the silence revealed itself. Beneath Rex's body was a child, a little girl. She was curled up in an oversized jacket. Her black hair tangled her face, pale from the cold, but her eyes were still open, glazed, but alive. Oh, God. Kelsey choked back tears. She recognized her instantly. Zelda Rodriguez, the missing girl reported out of Billings nearly 2 weeks ago, more than 300 miles from here. And Rex, he was still breathing. But barely. His eyes were glazed from hypothermia, ears, drooping body stiff, yet still shielding Zelda like a living wall, even as his own life flickered. Kelsey dropped to her knees, checking Zelda's vitals while whispering to Rex, "Good boy. You saved her." Beneath the snow, Kelsey could see scrapes, dried blood, and scattered paw and claw marks, as if Rex had fought to protect Zelda from unnamed threats. Wild wolves, a bear, or simply the creeping, bone-deep cold of death. Rex had endured for hours, maybe days, through freezing temperatures, to preserve Zelda's warmth with nothing but his own body. No GPS, no backup, no commands. Just instinct and love. Zelda stirred, groaning. Kelsey quickly opened her pack, pulled out a thermal blanket, warm water, and chemical heating pads, placing them gently around the girl's frail frame. She glanced at Rex, whose eyes tracked every movement, silently asking, "Is she okay?" Kelsey nodded through tears. "She'll be okay, and you will be too." Then Zelda whispered something that made Kelsey freeze. "The dog sang me to sleep every night, so I wouldn't be scared." In her fevered delirium, the words carved themselves deep into Kelsey's heart, a vision of a four-legged warrior standing alone against forest frost and darkness just to keep a child breathing. And in that moment, Kelsey understood she hadn't just rescued a little girl. She was kneeling before a living symbol of loyalty and sacrifice, Rex the dog, who refused to survive. Unless Zelda did too. Kelsey pulled out her radio, her hands trembling from both the cold and adrenaline. "This is Ranger Kelsey. I have visual on Rex and a little girl alive. I repeat, the girl is alive. Requesting immediate medical support and emergency evac. Coordinates transmitting now." The howling wind distorted the signal, but Detective Castellanos' voice still came through. "We're deploying the Special Rescue Unit. Kelsey, hold your position. Weather's bad, but we're coming." The rapid response team would have to traverse nearly 2 miles of treacherous terrain, click ravines, snow-laden forests, and unstable cliffs. But Kelsey knew time was not on their side. Zelda was showing signs of respiratory distress, and Rex was fading. No waiting, no standing by. Kelsey made her call. She had to build shelter and retain body heat now. She used her survival knife to cut through the emergency tarp, constructing a makeshift tent from branches cord and thermal jackets. She laid Rex and Zelda side by side, nestling chemical heat packs between layers of blankets, carefully turning Rex's body to avoid further injury. Zelda croaked hoarsely, "I'm cold. The dog told me not to sleep." Kelsey's throat clenched. She knew sleeping was a sign of critical hypothermia. She gently kept Zelda awake, rubbing her limbs, speaking softly, warming her fingers and cheeks with her bare palms. Rex, despite his condition, lifted his head every time Zelda whimpered. His breaths were thin wisps of fog, but his gaze never left the child, as if his soul was tethered to hers, guarding her with every ounce of life he had left. Outside, a snowstorm was forming, thick clouds gathering above, bringing freezing gusts and a blizzard that would soon make helicopter access impossible. Kelsey radioed again. "I don't think they'll hold out until the team arrives. I need advanced triage instructions right now." A medic's voice crackled through from the command center, "Kelsey, you're doing good. Keep their core temps up. Do not let them fall asleep. The rescue team is approaching from the northern ridge, ETA 2 hours. You are the only thing keeping them alive." Kelsey looked at Rex, his eyes now barely open, chest wheezing faintly. Zelda clutched her arm and whispered, "If Rex dies, I don't want to wake up." Kelsey's heart twisted painfully. In her emergency kit, she had one single dose of handheld glucose IV designed for acute exhaustion. Only one dose, usable on only one of them. She looked at Rex's unresponsive, plummeting body temperature. Then Zelda, weak pulse, blue lips, but still conscious enough to cling to her. Kelsey made a decision. She injected Rex, because if he died first, Zelda would lose her will to fight, and the girl would let go. As the needle pierced his skin, Rex flinched. His eyes fluttered open. Within minutes, a subtle change. His breathing slowed, became more steady. His ears twitched faintly. Zelda smiled faintly in her haze. Rex didn't leave me. Kelsey didn't know if she'd made the right choice. But in a storm, sometimes, the heart is the only compass you have left. Kelsey sat huddled inside the makeshift tent, her hands curled tight around the radio, trembling from the cold. Snow kept falling, cutting into her skin like shards of glass. The wind howled in sharp gusts, a sound as cold and hollow as the old forest crying out in the night. Beside her, Rex lay motionless, but his body temperature had stabilized, no longer dropping as rapidly. Zelda curled into a ball under the thermal blanket, her tiny frame trembling with each breath. She hadn't spoken since Kelsey had administered the injection to Rex. Kelsey couldn't tell if the girl was asleep or simply too exhausted to speak. But her eyes remained slightly open, and that was the only thing keeping Kelsey from collapsing into despair. She whispered more to herself than anyone else. "Hold on. We're not going to die here." Kelsey sprang up at the sound of a sharp crack, a branch breaking from somewhere in the dense woods. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the snow. And it didn't sound like any wild animal. She switched on her flashlight, sweeping a wide beam across the trees. Darkness everywhere. The snow reflected back blinding white glare, turning the world into a blur of shadows and illusion. She stayed still, perfectly still. The silence was suffocating. Then, another sound. Closer, lower, a rasping, dragging noise. Someone, or something, was nearby. Rex lifted his head at his first movement since the injection. He didn't whine. He didn't bark. He just stared into the darkness with razor-focus ears, upright muscles taut. It was the clearest signal Kelsey had ever learned in K-9 training. A subject was approaching, and it might be dangerous. Not a bear, not a wolf. If it were wild, Rex would have growled. This was something else, familiar, and yet wrong. Kelsey picked up the rescue baton and switched on the long-range spotlight. She stepped back toward Zelda, placing one hand on the girl's shoulder, the other gripping the baton tight. "Who's there?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm a federal ranger. There are injured civilians. If you're human, please come forward." No answer. Just silence. A silence that didn't feel natural. Rex rose unsteady, not yet able to stand fully, but he growled, soft, deliberate. Zelda stirred. She whispered, barely audible. "He came back." Kelsey froze. "Who came back?" Zelda blinked, her voice dreamy, detached. "The man who took me away. From that place. But he told me not to trust anyone in a police uniform." The word sent a chill down Kelsey's spine. She immediately turned the beam toward the west and saw them faint boot prints in the snow, unfamiliar fresh. Not hers, not Rex's, and certainly not Zelda's. Someone had been and was still watching them. Kelsey ducked back into the tent, pulling Zelda close, her voice now low and firm. "Zelda, I need you to tell me who brought you here. Why were you in this forest?" Zelda's eyes stared blankly for a moment, then fluttered. Her mind seemed to drift back into something buried. "I don't know his name. He had a knife. He said not to be scared. He said he was running." Kelsey swallowed hard. "Running from who, Zelda?" The girl looked up, her eyes wide, and whispered, "The one in uniform, just like yours." The ashen sky sagged over the mountain range like a heavy blanket thick with the breath of an approaching snowstorm. Snow began to fall harder, sweeping over the ground in thin but deadly layers. Kelsey tightened the strap on her backpack, the headlamp casting sharp light across a set of unfamiliar boot prints no more than 20 meters from her shelter. They were fresh. The snow hadn't covered them yet. Someone was, or had just been standing there, watching her, watching Zelda. Rex let out a low growl, not loud, but raw, with the primal instinct of a warrior returned from the edge of death. Kelsey placed a hand on his head, both of them silent scanning. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet. No birds, no wind, as if it too was holding its breath. Kelsey pulled out her wind compass and mapped the direction. The wind was blowing west to east, if the footprints were still visible. The pursuer had to be above, hidden behind the ridge of pines and jagged rock. She checked her radio still had signal. But should she call in backup, now Zelda was asleep, curled in the thermal blanket. Rex was better, but not ready to fight. If there was danger, Kelsey was on her own alone, miles deep in snowbound wilderness. But she had to know. She had to know who or what was stalking them. She recorded their shelter's coordinates, left a blinking locator beacon for rescuers if they arrived later, and silently loaded her handgun. Then, like a ghost, she followed the footprints into the snow. Not 200 meters in, she spotted something odd. The boot prints didn't head in a straight path. They looped, circled a small area, then vanished into a narrow stone crevice beneath a ledge. Kelsey crouched, shone her light down. Her heart thudded. Fire, a smear of black ash, still faintly warm. Someone had camped here close, far too close to Zelda. She slid down into the crevice. The scene opened like a scout's bunker, scattered traces of military-grade canned rations, a bloody field dressing, and on the stone wall, encoded markings she recognized from Joint Tactical Training surveillance codes, terrain notes, movement maps. This wasn't a survival camp, and it wasn't a hiker's outpost. It was an observation post made by someone trained. Kelsey held her breath. A folded note was pinned beneath a flat rock, wedged to stay dry. She eased it open under the beam of her flashlight. Neat handwriting, slanted and sure. Written in blue ink, time-stamped Day 8. The child is stable. Supplies low. Signs of being tracked. Must leave before the 10th. At the bottom, 3 red-stamped letters. M.T. Kelsey froze. Michael Torres. The internal codename of a covert intelligence agent missing for nearly 2 years, once part of a counter-terrorism task force operating along the western border. So, he was alive. And he'd saved Zelda. But if it really was Torres, what was he running from? And who was after him? Kelsey returned to the shelter just as the snowstorm hit, gusts lashing her face like shattered glass. Rex whined as she stepped inside her cloak, streaked with mud snow, and one small item, a folded map circled in red ink. She unfolded it, eyes scanning. Zelda stirred, still asleep. But just as Kelsey placed the map near the gear pile, the girl murmured, "I know that place." Kelsey spun. What did you say? Zelda nodded, faintly, eyes still closed. I dreamed it. He was there. He said he'd come back, if I stayed quiet. The chill that ran through Kelsey's spine had nothing to do with the snow. It was a seed of doubt now taking root. Was Torres really a savior, or was he a piece of something darker, with Zelda caught in the middle? Night fell over Glacier like a sheet of stone-cold darkness, swallowing all light and warmth. In the blackness, only the howling wind through ancient pine canopies and the crunch of breaking snow beneath Kelsey's careful steps remained. She left the temporary shelter Rex standing guard over Zelda and headed toward the red-circled location on the map, possibly the most critical lead to Michael Torres, or to someone even more dangerous. Every meter was burned into Kelsey's memory, like sketching a mental map. She followed not only the coordinates, but also the instinct of someone forged in the wilderness, an instinct that had saved her more than once. The snow was deep, the ice unforgiving, but it was the unnatural silence that chilled her most. No owl calls, no snapping branches, just an unsettling emptiness. Then suddenly, a glint, a flicker like light off a lens. She froze. Someone was watching. Don't move. You're in my sights. The voice was low, firm, as cold and sharp as steel. Not angry, not threatening, just certain. The voice of someone accustomed to commanding from the edge of death. Kelsey slowly raised her hands, eyes sweeping for the source. I'm Ranger Kelsey. I'm not here to harm you. I'm investigating a case involving a missing girl named Zelda. She was protected by someone named Michael Torres. I believe that's you. Silence. Then, a figure emerged from behind a moss-covered rock, lowering his rifle eyes locked on her. It was him, Michael Torres. But this wasn't the legendary FBI agent from his file. This was a gaunt man, bearded, wary-eyed, flickering like firelight in a storm. A man who'd lived far too long on the fringe of society and the law. Zelda's alive, he rasped, barely believing the words. Kelsey nodded. Thanks to Rex, but if you hadn't found her first, she wouldn't have survived. Torres said nothing. His shoulders trembled from cold or emotion. It was hard to tell. Then he spoke. Zelda wasn't just a lost child. She was an accidental witness during a covert surveillance op, and the key to exposing a terrorist network operating undercover inside protected wilderness zones throughout the American West. But when Torres discovered his own superiors had been compromised, he did the unthinkable. He vanished from his agency, taking Zelda with him to protect her and to expose the conspiracy from the shadows. I broke every rule. They call me a traitor. But if I came back, Zelda would die, and they'd keep using the forests as invisible battlegrounds. Kelsey stayed silent. She didn't know which part was truth, which part delusion. But the look in Torres's eyes when he spoke of Zelda, that light in the storm, could not be faked. You need to come back. With me. Tell them everything. Torres looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. Only once, I know. The girl is safe. After that, I'll come forward. But if I don't make it back tonight, you need to know where they're hiding. I left everything on a USB drive hidden beneath the wooden shelter inside a black carved squirrel statue. They'll come for it. You must act first. Kelsey took the drive. They parted in the snow like shadows moving in opposite directions, knowing from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. At dawn, the Montana sky was heavy with gray and laden with snow. Inside the temporary shelter, Kelsey double-checked her GPS device comms radio and sealed the USB drive inside a waterproof pouch. Rex lay beside Zelda, eyes locked on Kelsey's every move, as if sensing a storm far greater than the weather. And he was right. Just as Kelsey stepped outside to inspect the perimeter, her shoulder radio crackled to life, with a strange signal, 3 short whistle tones, the emergency code only Michael Torres would use. She knew instantly the enemy had arrived. The crunching of snow had been expertly masked, but not enough to fool someone trained at Montana's Survival Academy. Kelsey recognized at least 3 assailants closing in from 3 angles, a triangular encirclement, the kind used by professionals. The battle begins. Kelsey refused to wait to be hunted. She struck first. A single whistle. Rex understood immediately. Protect Zelda at all costs. Kelsey rolled behind a massive tree, drew her pistol, and activated a handheld GPS scrambler. She fired the first shot, not to hit, but to disorient. The crack of gunfire shattered the stillness of the forest, igniting chaos. One attacker rushed out from behind a boulder, spraying bullets. Kelsey closed in, kicked his knee, and slammed him unconscious with the butt of her gun. The other 2 hesitated, clearly not expecting a forest ranger to fight like a special ops agent. Meanwhile, in the shelter, Rex growled low and feral. Zelda curled tightly beside him, trembling. Heavy footsteps neared. The tarp tore open. One of them had reached the shelter. But before he could aim, Rex launched like a missile. His leap toppled the man, despite him being nearly 6 feet tall. A gunshot rang out. A bullet struck Rex's shoulder. But he didn't stop. With everything he had, Rex bit into the attacker's wrist, pinning him to the snow, eyes blazing like fire. Zelda, shaking, did the unthinkable. She grabbed a metal rod nearby and struck the man's head, knocking him out cold. Kelsey sprinted back to the shelter to find Rex wounded, and Zelda trembling but conscious. She knew they couldn't stay another minute. She hoisted Rex onto her shoulder, grabbed Zelda's hand, and headed toward the emergency extraction site 5 kilometers away on a path only she and Torres knew. Behind them, blood stained the snow. 3 enemies, rising eyes burning with vengeance. Their escape through the frozen forest was a brutal test of endurance and nerve. The snow was deep. The wind-howled trails vanished beneath sheets of ice. Rex bled heavily, never whimpering. Zelda, though exhausted, never let go of Kelsey's hand. As they neared the site, Kelsey heard the hum of engines, a military helicopter cutting through the air. She fired a red flare into the sky. A moment later, a searchlight burst through the trees. The Federal Tactical Unit led by Special Agent Rodriguez descended. Kelsey shouted into the wind, "They're behind us." Armed, and they know we have the USB. With cover from the strike team, Kelsey brought Zelda and Rex into the safe zone, while behind them, the pursuers stumbled into a trap set in advance by Torres and Rodriguez. After 15 minutes of heavy combat, 2 enemies were captured. One was fatally shot, ending the ruthless forest pursuit. But one question remained: who sent them? And more importantly, what were they trying to protect? As the darkness faded after the harrowing pursuit, Kelsey, Zelda, and Rex were transported to a temporary forward base, a federal communications outpost buried deep within the western edge of Glacier National Park. Here, all signals were cut off from the outside world, a zone of silence where secrets were never meant to escape. Special Agent Rodriguez's face, as cold and sharp as forged steel, slid a thick file across the table toward Kelsey. On the cover, only one line: Torres, codename Graveshade. A chill ran down Kelsey's spine. Torres wasn't just a missing agent. He had once led a national-level surveillance operation targeting the Pale Ember, a domestic terrorist organization formed by military veterans who believed the federal government was manipulating public freedom through technology and media. Rodriguez locked eyes with her, his voice dropping Zelda, wasn't lost. She's a witness, and possibly the final key to unraveling Pale Ember's network. Kelsey froze. That quiet 8-year-old girl with sorrowful eyes. What was she carrying inside? When Zelda awoke in the field clinic with Rex beside her receiving IV fluids, Kelsey sat quietly by her bed. The girl turned to her and whispered, "Agent Torres told me not to tell anyone. But now he's gone." Through fragmented words, Zelda explained that Torres had found her after she ran away from a foster center in Billings. But instead of turning her in, he kept her not to hide her, but to protect her. Zelda had accidentally overheard an encrypted conversation between a man working at the center and a member of the Pale Ember. They spoke of a biological interference transmission device, a type of eavesdropping tech disguised as ordinary objects. No one knew that one of the early test units had been attached to Zelda's backpack, and the girl had heard everything. Torres realized that if the incident entered official channels, Zelda would be pulled into a web of investigations, or worse, silenced by those trying to cover up a much larger conspiracy. He chose to run. He and Zelda lived off-grid in the forest, moving between old surveillance outposts, while slowly offloading encrypted data into the USB drive, the one now in Kelsey's hands. When Torres discovered their radio frequencies had been intercepted, he knew they had been found. And that was when he took Zelda to the spot where Kelsey eventually found her. Inside the USB, Rodriguez and the federal tech team decrypted a voice recording from Torres. "If you're hearing this, I might be dead. But don't let Zelda fall into their hands. The USB doesn't just hold evidence, it's a map to Pale Ember's operations hub. I don't trust anyone in the system. But if this reaches you, Kelsey, get her somewhere safe and finish what I started." Kelsey clenched her fist. She wasn't an agent, hadn't been trained in the shadows, but she had come too far to turn back now. In the corner of the room, Rex stirred. Though still wounded, his eyes never left Zelda. The girl reached out, gently touching his head, and whispered, "We're not running anymore." "Right, Rex." The dog growled softly a vow in canine form. Kelsey stepped out of the debrief room. Outside, the snow still fell, but this time it wasn't a veil of uncertainty. It was a stage for the final reckoning. With Torres's data, Zelda's trust, and Rex's unwavering loyalty, Kelsey was ready. Pale Ember would no longer hide beneath the forest's shadows. When the data gateway on the USB was fully decrypted, a horrifying picture emerged: a nationwide underground network, meticulously coordinated under the name Pale Ember. It wasn't a fringe terrorist group, not a few disgruntled militants. Pale Ember was a phantom organization teetering on the edge between ultra-patriotism and domestic terrorism, fueled by advanced technology, military strategy, and a simmering hatred of the federal government. From Torres's data, especially satellite images and audio recordings, accidentally captured by Zelda Rodriguez and the tactical intelligence team, pinpointed a location deep in the Bitterroot Mountains, southern Montana. There stood a covert training facility disguised as a veterans rehabilitation camp. But in reality, it was a forge for insurgents teaching guerrilla tactics, cyber warfare, and automated weapons engineering. The internal codename, Red Current, a reference to blood that must be spilled to cleanse America. At the end of an emergency coordination meeting at the Federal Operations Center, Agent Walsh's steady voice cut through the silence. "Kelsey, this is your call, but we want you to lead the frontline breach team." The room fell silent. Kelsey, a park ranger, not a special ops agent, but she had found Rex, saved Zelda, and traced the first threads of the Pale Ember web. She looked at Rex now, able to stand with support, and an IV line running into his flank. "I'll go," Kelsey said, eyes unwavering. "And I'm taking Rex with me." The assault was planned down to the second. At 3:08 a.m., a multi-agency strike force combining FBI, DHS, and National Park Protection units converged on Camp Red Current, supported by surveillance drones and encrypted comms. Kelsey led the Northern Forest Breach team, the route suspected of hiding logistical tunnels. She and Rex moved like shadows, each step echoing the pulse of the mountain forest. But only minutes into the incursion, a Pale Ember patrol detected unusual movement. Alarms blared, the fight erupted. In the hail of gunfire and smoke, Rex broke formation to shield an injured agent pinned behind a boulder. Even with his legs still braced, the dog surged forward like an unbreakable sentinel. For a moment, the enemy hesitated, stunned by a limping K9 charging the front. That pause was all Kelsey's unit needed to push through and breach the inner compound. Inside the compound, they located a server room controlling broadcast relay towers across the western U.S., including nodes capable of spoofing the National Emergency Alert System. Pale Ember had prepared for a full-scale communications blackout, aiming to plunge the country into chaos while launching coordinated domestic attacks. Kelsey, relying on her topographical training and survival instincts, discovered a hidden access route behind the server room, a narrow fault line exiting to the mountain's edge. It enabled the backup team to breach the final barrier and secure the stronghold. As sunrise touched the snow-dusted ridges, all of Camp Red Current was under federal control. Over 40 extremist operatives were captured. Caches of weapons and encrypted data servers were seized. Rex was evacuated on a stretcher lying beside Kelsey and Zelda, who had been safely protected in a rear security zone. Rodriguez approached quietly and placed a firm hand on Kelsey's shoulder. "If it weren't for you and Rex, today could have ended in blood across the nation." The morning light broke across snow-covered peaks, spilling gently into the forested valley that once bore the shadows of hatred and dark conspiracies. But now everything was quiet again, as if nature itself had bowed before a silent act of sacrifice. Kelsey sat beside Rex, her hand gently stroking the thick coat, now stained with dust, forest wind, and blood, the blood of loyalty. A short distance away, Zelda slept soundly. Her first deep sleep after days of surviving in the wild, running and holding on to unspoken memories that still clung like shadows. Medical evaluations confirmed Zelda had not only survived, she had crossed the edge of life and death by sheer willpower. No family, no clear identity, no guardian stepping forward. But Zelda had Rex, and now she had Kelsey. When authorities suggested placing her in a juvenile care facility, Kelsey asked one simple question. "After everything, do you really think this child belongs in a building full of paperwork and walls, or out in nature where she learned how to live?" The decision came swiftly. After a special hearing, Zelda would be placed under Kelsey's guardianship, with provisional custody granted by the federal government. And of course, Rex was recognized as an inseparable member of that new family. It took Rex a full month to recover. During that time, thousands of letters, hand-drawn pictures, and thank you notes poured in from children across America, all addressed to the ranger station where Kelsey worked. The media called Rex the soldier without a uniform, the guardian of innocence. But for Kelsey and Zelda, Rex needed no title. He was friend, hero, family. When offered a promotion to the federal level, a national role overseeing ecological security, Kelsey declined. Standing beneath the trees where she had spent her life gazing at the silver blue sky, she said, "I don't need a desk to protect my country. I saw a dog protect a child with nothing but his breath. If I want to live in honor of that, I'll stay right here, where I'm needed most. Every morning as the sun rose beyond the snowy ridges, Kelsey walked with Rex and Zelda along the edge of the creek. Zelda smiled now, a smile never once captured in any missing child report. She was learning to read wind direction track animal prints and tell stories to Rex with the wild, boundless imagination of a healing soul. In the wilderness that once seemed harsh and unforgiving, a child, a woman, and a dog had not only survived. They had found each other and built a home out of trust, hope, and unwavering loyalty. If this story touched you, share it. Not just to recount a rescue mission, but to remind one another that in a world full of chaos, the most extraordinary thing still is unconditional love, whether it comes from a person or a brave dog. What would you do if you were Kelsey? What would you believe if you were Zelda? And what would you stay loyal to? If you were Rex, drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, and don't forget to hit that follow button, because stories like this are still waiting to be found beneath the deep whispering trees.